books myself, but in the process of making the film, I actually found out about them, and then I really didn't know whether I would be able to get pictures from the books themselves, and then somebody said, why don't you Google it? And I Googled it, and I found everything on the internet, which is wonderful. And there was this article which was published in the World Policy Journal. It was written by Craig Davis, and Craig Davis now is working for the Labor Department in Washington, D.C. And there was also an article in the Washington Post, and I was so shocked by what I read and by the pictures from the books that it really surprised me that I didn't know about it. I think most Americans have never heard anything about it, even though there was a small article in the Washington Post about it. So I just thought that it was very important for me to share that information with other people. And the reason for that is that I just want to emphasize that what's going on in the world right now, we shouldn't really be shocked by that. It's not all black and white, and it's not all about them over there, doing their jihad. Everything is very interconnected. And I wanted to give you a sense of that, and that's why I included that information in the film.
I have an extension of that. Oh, I'm sorry. I have an extension of that exact same question, actually, because I'm not so good with history, and so what I was getting from the documentary is that there was these books that were sent over, funded by America in some ways. Was it the time that communism was a threat and we were training people to be on our side to fight communism, and then somehow change of events happened in the world, and the jihadists that we think of now today are more towards kind of against the American culture. Is that kind of
Yeah, that's kind of what happened. It wasn't just the books. There was millions and millions of dollars that were poured into that region at that time. And a lot of the money was actually funneled through the Pakistani government into Afghanistan and in parts of the northwestern frontier of Pakistan itself, which are now, as we know, have become these problematic regions. Well, a lot of money was poured in that region, and a lot of arms and ammunition also flowed in there. I mean, we had these trucks in Pakistan because like I say in the film, I grew up in Brussels, but we actually returned to Pakistan in the 1980s when General Zia was the military dictator there. And you would see, and we lived in Islamabad for a long time, and we would see these big, huge trucks, very different from the local trucks we have, because we have these really chunky, big trucks which are painted in Pakistan, and that's the mode of transportation, so that's what we know of trucks over there. But these were really sleek, long, huge trucks, very kind of high-tech, cutting-edge. And you would see them moving around all the time, rows and rows of these trucks going along. Well, apparently, these were trucks which were taking ammunition into Afghanistan. This was something that we could see all around in the capital, even. And then were sometimes coming back loaded with drugs, because there was a lot of drug money which was being made at that time as well. And then there was this indoctrination, of Afghani school children, which for whatever reason I think is not justifiable, for whatever reason, even if they were supposed to fight on our side. That was going on as well because, we wanted this jihad against the Soviets. General Zia was in Pakistan for many, many years. Actually, the only way we got rid of him was that he died in a plane crash. Otherwise, he would probably still be there. And he was, even though he hanged an elected prime minister, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, I talk about that, he was actually the father of Benazir Bhutto. Even though he deposed him and then hanged him, he was still America's biggest ally in the region because he was making all of this possible. So it's very complicated, that's all I'm trying to say. I'm not just saying that everything that's happening is the American government's fault. No, that's not at all what I'm trying to say, but I'm saying that it's all kind of interlinked, It's not as simple as it seems. I think the times have kind of changed. I think when I was growing up, everybody pretty much in Pakistan, and you hear someone in the film say that, that people really used to look up to the United States. Because to most people in the world, I would say not even just Muslims, but to most people in the world, America really represented, civil liberties and the freedom of speech and, the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights is just so inspiring, and it is so eloquent that I think people really looked up to the United States. Now I think that things are quite different. And again, it's not just, I'm not just speaking about Muslims, but I'm speaking about most of the rest of the world. You know, even Europeans have a different view of the United States now. And especially during the last 8 years, you know, all the things that we have done in the world, you know, don't speak very well of us as a nation, and especially of our government. But I would like to add that I think most Muslims do have the sense of separating Americans from American foreign policy. They do make that distinction. So just because, you know, the American government is doing things that they don't agree with, you know, they don't blame each and every American for that. They don't do that. I think they can separate that quite well, actually. And that was actually something that came up in one of the discussions I've had, you know, after the screening of the film, where there was this American man who came up to the mic and said that he travels widely in the Islamic world, and he said that it was really wonderful that people could make that distinction, that they did not associate him with, you know, American foreign policy only. They could see him for who he was. And actually, it would be really nice, I think, if our community in the United States could make that distinction as well, you know, between people, just regular people, and then the policies of certain governments or certain groups. People have asked me after seeing the film, you know, they have said, well, even within the Muslim community, there's obviously a lot of diversity, but you focus on a particular socioeconomic class. I mean, these are all, you know, doctors, professionals, you know, people who are relatively well-to-do, educated. What about the rest of the community? And what I say to them is, first of all, the film is called The Muslims I Know. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I from the beginning, I'm not claiming to represent each and every Muslim. And I think that is that claim should not be made by anyone, because it's simply impossible to do it. There's too much diversity. There are Muslims all over the world. They speak different languages, have completely different cultures. Sometimes there's hardly anything in common, because even their interpretation of Islam can be very different. So I don't want to make that claim that I represent everyone. Now, why did I focus on these people? Because I feel that these are the people who are completely missing from the media. I mean, you never see these people. You never hear these people. And I think a lot of people are shocked that they even exist. I mean, you know, when the film opened at the drive-in theater, there was this kind of collective aha moment, and people came up to the mic and said, wow, these people look just like our neighbors. They were surprised. So it might not surprise you, but I think that is an important message to put out there as far as non-Muslim Americans, you know, in general are concerned. So that was one reason why I decided to do that. And I do want to emphasize that by doing that, I do not mean at all that other socioeconomic classes, you know, are any different. Most Muslims throughout the world are just regular folks. They don't support terrorism, you know, they lead normal lives. They want the same things that anybody else wants. So I'm not trying to say that this is the only socioeconomic class which is moderate, you know. I think the vast majority of Muslims are like that. For example, people, you know, ask about Pakistan, and you know, they say, well, maybe in Pakistan, a small minority of people might feel this way, but what about the vast majority of Muslims in Pakistan, people from other socioeconomic classes? You know, are they extremists in their views? And what I say to them is that many times the differences are more cultural, I think, than in the way they practice their religion. And yes, they might be more conservative or they might be more religious, and again, it's perfectly okay to do that. But interestingly enough, if you look at the history of Pakistan, if you look at all the elections that have ever taken place in the history of Pakistan, and unfortunately there haven't been that many because we've had a lot of military rulers and they've been there for a long time. If you look at them, religious parties in Pakistan have never received more than 10% of the vote. Exactly. Never. Last election, 3% of the vote. How can you argue against that? And interestingly enough, another interesting fact is that most of the upper middle class people, the kind of people you see in the film, tend not to vote because they think it's really not worth it to vote. They feel very disengaged from the political process. It is the lower middle class and the poor and the peasant. Those are the people who go to the polls and vote. So, I mean, you can't argue with that, you know. So even people in other socioeconomic classes are just as moderate. They always vote for secular parties. They always do.